There have been a number of these strikes going back and forth with the Gulf states. Of course, this all started with Israel and the U.S. striking Iran's oil facilities. The Gulf states, they met recently and they did issue a statement to the press where they said, of course, they put the blame on this for Iran. They are blaming Iran for not wanting to have some type of diplomacy. My perspective about this is that if the Gulf states don't want to be involved in this war, then their response should be to the United States: get your bases out of our country. You're putting our people and their lives at risk here. But that is not the response they're going to give because they're very much embedded with the West. If you had the opportunity to speak to members of the Gulf states, to speak to these royal families, what would you say to them?
Well, it would also have to include Erdogan in Turkey, the Jordanian regime, the Egyptian regime, and Pakistan, because they all signed this statement. And it's clear that Iran is surrounded by U.S. bases in the Persian Gulf in particular, and those bases have been used to kill Iranians, to kill Iranian children, to murder Iranian citizens, to destroy the infrastructure of the country, to destroy critical infrastructure of the country. And of course, it's not just these Arab family regimes. Turkey is allowing the U.S. to use its radar base in that country, and it's allowing NATO AWACS planes to collect information. And Saudi Arabia and all of these countries, Jordan and these countries in the Persian Gulf, they allow the United States to use their airspace. They allow them to attack Iran from their territory. We've seen the U.S. armed forces declare that, showed images of HIMARS missiles being fired into Iran from these countries. So they're not neutral. They have blood on their hands, and they are all complicit. And it's really revealing that countries like, or people like Erdogan and Sisi and Abdullah and Jordan would support such a position. If these bases did not exist, there would be no Iranian counterstrikes. But it's like having military bases for Brazil or China or India or Russia in Canada. And then they start firing missiles into the United States, and the Canadian government says, it's none of our business, we're neutral. No sane person is going to accept that argument. That's an insult to our intelligence. So if today these countries in the Persian Gulf region were to declare that the United States military must leave and that they can no longer use their airspace, let alone their facilities, to attack Iran, then it would be over. It's very simple. But unfortunately, all of these regimes, and that includes Egypt and Jordan and the Turkish regime, they're bound to the West. And they have not even condemned the U.S., Israeli, they didn't even condemn the Israelis. They didn't condemn either Trump or Netanyahu for this active war, for murdering all these Iranians, for murdering our leader, for murdering 268. So they've really exposed themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very telling. I have to tell you, here in the United States, the Pentagon just announced that they are considering sending even more troops to Iran. It's crazy considering troops have already died. We covered the story about the fighter jet that was struck down the other day, and here they are thinking about sending more troops. I have explained to my viewers that I don't see any way that the U.S. or Israel would beat Iran without using some type of nuclear weapon. And considering the way that Donald Trump and Netanyahu are, that seems to be a possibility. The WHO, the World Health Organization, they just released a statement that said that they are very much preparing for the possibility of nukes. Is Iran prepared for that type of possibility that the U.S. or Israel could use a nuclear weapon?
The very fact that you raised this question, Sabrina, shows how barbaric and inhumane the regime in Washington and, of course, Tel Aviv is. It just shows that they have no sense of humanity, that they are true barbarians. The very fact that people are talking about this indicates that these are not normal people, because no sane person talks about using nuclear weapons. No sane person contemplates using nuclear weapons. But Iran is going to continue to defend itself. Iran is not going to surrender its sovereignty to thugs because they're threatening to murder and exterminate our women and children. That's basically what Trump and Netanyahu's allies in power and in the media and in politics have been suggesting at times. So we will continue to fight and we will continue to resist. But if anyone really seriously contemplates using nuclear weapons, everyone is going to seek nuclear weapons. Because from now on, they'll know that the only way to protect yourselves against this sinister regime in Washington and its sinister ally in Tel Aviv is to have nuclear weapons. And in an era where AI is moving forward so fast and the new technologies are being developed so quickly, many countries in the near future will be able to develop their own nuclear weapons.
Yeah, this is one of my fears. It's interesting. This came out recently that, you know, some of the NATO countries have been pushing back on Donald Trump. They said this is not their war. He issued a statement recently that I want people to see. Shout out to Clash Report for sharing this. Without the U.S., NATO is a paper tiger. They didn't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now that fight is militarily won with very little danger for them. They complain about the high oil prices they are forced to pay, but they don't want to help open the Strait of Hormuz. A simple military maneuver, that is the single reason for the high oil prices. So easy for them to do with so little risk. Cowards. And we will remember, and that says, of course, President Donald Trump. The other NATO countries, and there's several of them, said that they did not want to get involved in this, and rightfully so. But it shows here, Donald Trump has been lying repeatedly on Western media. He said that Iran doesn't have air power anymore. Obviously, we see that's not the case with the fighter jet that was just struck down. He said that they demolished Iran's Navy. Basically, him and Pete Hegseth are trying to convince the American people that Iran has nothing left to use, even though we're seeing Iran use these weapons. But this very statement makes it clear that he needs those NATO allies to come in and help open the Strait of Hormuz, which, from what I understand, cannot be done by air. It would mean that they would have to send in ground troops. And then that kind of sounds like a threat to those other NATO countries. We will remember. What do you think is happening here with Donald Trump? Because it's very apparent, those of us who've been paying attention, we realize the U.S. is losing here. And Donald Trump is, I guess, begging the NATO allies to intervene, which would essentially bring about World War III, in my opinion. This is a disaster for the United States, is a disaster for Israel. Why do you think he makes that statement?
I think he's unhinged. I think his mind has been overthrown. And he never was very sane, but I think he's much worse now than he was in the past. First of all, he's lying because Joe Kent's resignation, Joe Kent's resignation clearly shows that what Iran has been saying all along is true. That Iran has not been pursuing nuclear weapons, and that Iran is simply carrying out its legal rights within the framework of international law, as all countries do. So this war was based on a lie. And he continues to lie, even though Cantu was his own appointee and who is a key person in this whole debate, says that no, it's completely untrue, and it's simply because the Zionist lobby and the Israeli regime wanted this war that is being carried out. But as you rightly pointed out, Trump is lying. If Iran has been defeated, why is he begging so many different countries to participate and help? And even if he did open, let's say, the Strait of Hormuz, and thousands of lives were lost, and the United States spent hundreds of billions of dollars to open the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's navy, which is in tunnels, speedboats that fire missiles, surface, sea to sea missiles, sea to ground missiles, sea to air missiles. The Navy will swiftly come out and start targeting. And Iran's missile capabilities, which we're seeing, are endless. Remember, another lie that we heard during the initial days, and we continue to hear, is that Iran is running out of missiles. Iran is running out of drones. Iran is running out of launchers. Well, today, in the last 2-3 days, Iran has been hitting the hardest since the beginning. So Iran will use those missiles and drones to destroy all the ships in the Persian Gulf region. And if the war escalates, all those oil and gas installations on the other side of the Persian Gulf would be destroyed too. So let's say he somehow does open the Strait of Hormuz, which is not necessarily going to be the case. There will be no oil. There will be no gas. There will be no ships to take that non-existing oil and gas. So his arrogance and his foolishness is leading the world towards a global economic catastrophe. And this is something, Sabrina, that I've been saying for a very long time. And I think you and I have discussed this at least 3 or 4 times in the past. For Trump to say, who knew that Iran would strike back at or shut down the Strait of Hormuz or strike back at U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf? Well, if he had been listening to your show, or anyone in the White House or among U.S. elites had been listening to any of these media programs that you and I are familiar with, they would have known that this was definitely going to happen. Everything that we said, everything that I said before that would happen has happened. So how is it that they don't know? Either their intelligence is much worse than they claim, the Mossad and the CIA, or Trump is lying, or they're lying to Trump. It can't be anything but these 3, or maybe a combination of all 3. And also the underestimation of Iran's military capabilities. They thought that Iran, it would be over in a day or 2. In both wars, that's what both 8-9 months ago when they launched a blitzkrieg attack, and this time when they carried a much larger attack. Their calculations turned out to be completely wrong. The people in Iran have always been united, as I've always explained to you, but they're even more united now, and steadfast and adamant to defeat Trump and Netanyahu. During the last 3 weeks, people have been out on the streets every day, in the millions, under missile strikes. I've posted footage of at least 3 occasions where they bombed the demonstrators. In Tehran, I was at one of those demonstrations when they bombed it and a woman was murdered. But you don't even hear it in the Western media. They bombed demonstrations. They bombed another demonstration 2 nights ago in Anzali in the north of Iran. I posted the footage of all 3 of these attacks in my Twitter account. In another instance in Hamadan, they bombed a funeral procession. The United States and the Israeli regime bomb people who are demonstrating on the streets. And the Western media will not talk about it at all. And the most stunning thing of all is that people don't budge. When the missiles strike, 16-year-old girls, 15-year-old boys, 75-year-old women, 80-year-old men, they don't move. They stand their ground. So they have not only united Iranians further than before, but they've created a determination and created a faith within this nation that cannot be broken. Meanwhile, the Iranian armed forces are pounding U.S. and Israeli assets day and night. Whether in the Persian Gulf, all those oil and gas installations in Kuwait, the one that you alluded to, they're all partially owned by the United States, U.S. American businesses. When they bomb Iranian factories, which they do, when they bomb Iranian hospitals, which they do, when they bomb Iranian oil and gas installations, which they do, then the United States is going to have to suffer the consequences, and so is the Israeli regime.
Yeah, Professor Marandi, many of us have wondered, we've worried about you because I'm not sure if you saw this. I'm going to share this with everyone as well. I know you said you were at one of those protests. This account here on X, Terror Alarm, they are crowdfunding. They said, we are crowdfunding 1 million for a bounty to capture Mohammad Marandi, advisor to Iran's supreme leader and frequent IRGC-aligned propagandist. We want him alive. And it also says right here, paid partnership. So there's a sponsor that's a part of this as well. I don't even understand how this is legal, but there are accounts on Twitter that are trying to offer a bounty for you. Are you okay?
I do what I have to do, Sabrina, and I'm not going to be intimidated. And obviously, because I'm using the internet, I could be a target, but I have a responsibility, in my opinion, to speak out, to create awareness, and God willing, that's what I will do until either this war is over or something else happens. But what X or Twitter is doing is, of course, outrageous. But is it any different from the fact that they murdered our leader? That they murdered 268 little girls at an elementary school? And then they tried to blame Iran? They tried to blame the victim? They lied and said Iran used a Tomahawk missile to destroy the school. And have no doubt, Sabrina, people in Iran don't believe that this was an accident. This was the first wave of attacks. After 2-3 weeks, maybe an officer would be looking for a target, and then in the rush, he may make a mistake. A crime against humanity and bring about a crime against humanity. But this was the first attack. That means that they were preparing each of these targets for weeks, if not months. That school is a well-known school. You can find it on any Iranian or American app on Google search. They knew what it was. The children at that school, many of them were the children of officers. They wanted to teach them a lesson. That's how we see it. I cannot interpret it in any other way. If it had happened a week later, I would have said it's possible that this was an accident and they were looking, but it was on day one, hour one, minute one. But also, they've been targeting people for 3 weeks. They've struck 20 hospitals. They bombed the main building of the Red Crescent Society. They bombed hospitals and ambulances affiliated to hospitals, ambulances on highways. They bombed them. They seek out ambulances. Or the National Emergency Center for First Responders. They bombed that building too. They're bombing civilian infrastructure. They bomb neighborhoods. They slaughter 100 people at a go. They bring down apartment blocks, just as they did in Gaza, just as they did in Lebanon. Trump and Netanyahu are committing crimes against humanity, but just as criminal is Western media. Western media is just as criminal because they're foot soldiers in this war. They pretend as if this is a legitimate war. This was an unprovoked war, an illegal war. And we were actually carrying out negotiations, but which were making progress according to the Omani foreign minister. When he went to Washington, he said there was progress made. But even if there was no progress, they have no right to start slaughtering people. So I have no expectations of X, and I have no expectations of Western social media when they try to hide the genocide in Gaza, when Western journalists try to call the apartment blocks that are being flattened in Beirut Hezbollah strongholds to justify them. I have no expectations of anything that comes from the West except for ordinary people, disenfranchised people, critical people who are opposed to all this. But the elites in the West, they are criminal, their actions are criminal, and they are responsible for countless deaths and murders, and they have blood on their hands. So I have seen this, but it's not going to change anything for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Benjamin Netanyahu held a supposedly held a live press conference yesterday. I want to get your opinion about this. First of all, I'm not even 100% positive that press conference was live. I think it could have been pre-recorded. There was a statement that came from the Israeli Times or the Israel Times that said that the press would be there virtually. But the way it was portrayed prior to that event is that it was a live press conference and people were going to be right there in the room with Benjamin Netanyahu. Then we've seen other videos that show close-ups of all of a sudden Benjamin Netanyahu's sleeve just drops down out of nowhere. So then we're scratching our heads and asking again, okay, like, was this even real, or is this also AI like the other videos that we saw? There are people on X right now that are saying that Benjamin Netanyahu was killed on March 8th. What do you think is going on here? Do you believe he's alive?
I really have no idea. He's a coward, that's for sure. He has always been in hiding, both during the previous war and in this war. And when he fights, when he attacks Lebanon, he hides. And the interesting thing is that Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of War, as they call themselves, as he calls himself, he was calling Iranian leaders rats, and which just shows how despicable U.S. elites are. They don't even know how to speak like normal human beings. But he said they're all in hiding, and then on that very same day that he said that, we had the Quds Day, the International Quds Day rallies last Friday, the one that I spoke about where they bombed. And yet, across the country, these rallies were held, including in Tehran. Huge rally, huge. And I was there. And the president came. I think many people have seen the footage, just walked through the crowd. I think he came on a motorcycle. I didn't see the full clip. The Dr. Larijani, who was murdered recently by the Israeli regime, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, he was there among the people. The head of the judiciary was there. He was actually doing an interview when they bombed the demonstration, and he didn't even blink. And the foreign minister and others were there. So while the Iranian leaders, contrary to what Hegseth was claiming, while they were actually on the streets under airstrikes with the people and among the people, Netanyahu is nowhere to be seen. Whether he's dead or alive, even before that, even before the day in which you say that they they believe he was killed, he was a coward and he was in hiding. So the reality of what Hegseth says is about the Israeli regime and about those allied to the Israeli regime who are cowards, who lie to the people, who fabricate intelligence. It's so bad that the number 2 man in U.S. intelligence resigns, and his statement basically says that everything that Iran said is true. And the number 1 woman shamelessly goes and when she speaks and explains the situation, it is clear that he's right, that Joe Kent is right. Yet she either doesn't want to lose her job or she's a sellout. I can't think of a legitimate reason for her not to resign, Tulsi Gabbard. But it was clear from the statements that she was making when she wouldn't respond to the questions regarding Iran's nuclear program and so on. It was clear that everything that Joe Kent was saying was absolutely correct, and that she was being a coward not to be honest or open about it in front of Congress people in the United States.
Yeah, Joe Kent is now under investigation by the FBI. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy how these things happen. But we do need more people obviously speaking out and coming forward about that. I don't know if you're aware, but it's a sinking ship. There are people, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of lit the match, and more people are starting to fall away from this administration because they realize like it's an absolute disaster. So someone who was the head of the counter terrorism, unit, to say that Iran was not going to attack the United States, there was no threat, that really speaks volumes. And I'm watching Western media try to twist this and bend this into a pretzel to convince people, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And I just wonder how long can they go on with this lie? But then I'm reminded of the Iraq War and how long they told that lie, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So I think what's important for people to understand is that the media is really crucial here, because they're the ones that shape the narrative. They can bend the narrative and they can change it. And that's who a lot of people look towards. Although I have to say, more people have been coming over to independent media when this war started. More people want to hear other perspectives. And the polling does show here in the U.S. that the majority of Americans do not support war with Iran. So Trump is going not just against his base, but he's just going against the majority of Americans. How do the Iranian people feel? How are people feeling after the martyrdom of Ali Larijani? Like, what are people saying at this point?
I've never seen Iranians so united and so determined. It's just amazing to be on the streets. They go out every night. As we speak, they're on the streets, even though they've been fasting. Most people do fast. And they go out on the streets every night till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., from 6, 7, sometimes 5, even before they break their fast. They sometimes just go out on the streets and then they go home and others go. It's like the streets are always full. It's just stunning. And then you hear anti-missile defenses working, anti-drone defenses, anti-aircraft defenses, whatever, working. You see that there was one instance, there are 2 instances where they bombed the demonstration. There was another actually during the first week, and I was there too, where they dropped a large number of bombs, but at a bit of a distance. Again, no reaction from the crowd, except to chant louder. I've never seen even during the height of the revolution in the 1980s, I have never seen ordinary people so engaged and so adamant and so confident of their victory. during the first day when Ayatollah Khamenei was martyred and he refused to leave his home and his office because he said ordinary people, many of them have nowhere to go. He stayed put, even though it was clear he would be a primary target. After he was martyred, for a week, it took, because they couldn't gather to elect a new leader and have discussions, it took a week for them to choose a new leader. For a week, really, the people were running the country, and it was very well organized. There were no queues or lines for bread, or none of the supermarkets were overwhelmed with people, or the gas stations. Everything was normal, and the armed forces, within 45 minutes, they were striking back. It's amazing. I've never heard of such a thing before in my life. These are an extraordinary people. But with regards to the media, I think it just shows that this is the Epstein class media. There's no difference between CNN and Fox News, Breitbart and The Guardian. All of them are owned by oligarchs. They're owned by the same people who own the government.
You're attacking a gas facility in Qatar.
The reality is that the United States and Israel are abusing the soil, territories, and assets
You're not
scattered
attacking
around us.
Okay, but you're not merely attacking US assets, you're also attacking a gas field in Qatar and other Gulf neighbors. I just wonder why.
I was explaining. Tell me, who started this war in the first place? And who started attacking our gas field, South Pars field? It was Israel and Americans that attacked our gas field, our energy infrastructure in the first place. What we are doing is fighting back in accordance with our right of self-defense. As I said, we are not attacking any country, we are defending ourselves. Those military bases, those assets, those installations that are being used by Americans to conduct their military aggressions against Iran are legitimate targets under international law.
But a gas field is not a military asset, is it?
I'm telling you, yes, the gas field is shared by, we have made it clear that if Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would have to retaliate in self-defense against any infrastructure that is shared by the United States. That's part of the war game they have imposed on Iran.
Right, we'll come back to why the US says they launched this war in the first place. But I wonder what you say to your former allies in the Gulf who are calling for you to stop the strikes on civilian infrastructure, stop the strikes on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Will you listen to them? Oman, Qatar, these are countries that you've cooperated with in the recent past.
Yeah, sure. We do not feel any animosity or hostility toward the nations of the region. We common a lot with these countries. This is the result of American-Israeli aggression against Iran. Please do not forget that the military bases of the United States that are scattered around Iran are being used by the United Israel to conduct their military aggression against Iran.
But you say, sorry, I must just pick up on
it. War.
I must just pick up on it, though. You say you've got no animosity to your Gulf neighbours. You're attacking Qatar's gas field. Abu Dhabi and Kuwait are under attack too, just in the last few hours. That is not a defensive act, is it? That's Iran lashing out.
No, it is not. As I said, we are only targeting those assets, those installations that partly or wholly belongs to the United States. They are attacking our infrastructure, and Iranian armed forces are very careful to attack those military bases, those assets that are used by the United States in any form or manner to conduct their military aggression against Iran.
A gas field is not a military asset, but we'll move on because we have lots of other issues to discuss. Let's talk about your own self-interest.
Was Iranian field a military objective? No,
I'm just taking issue with your description of Qatar's gas field as a.
And so, one may be more bombastic and the other may be a bit more sophisticated, but they're all the same at the end. And I think people are increasingly seeing that. In the non-Western world, their influence, the Western media's influence has declined dramatically. But I think, as you rightly pointed out, in the United States itself is declining. And as things get worse, I think people are going to see even more clearly, just like they did in Gaza, that the Western mainstream media or the Epstein class-owned media has absolutely no credibility whatsoever.
That's right. More people are starting to see that. There was or it's coming in right now. So this is Friday morning. People will see this on Saturday. But
Sorry for
apparently,
interrupting you. Right now, you can hear people on the streets. Very faint. I don't know if you can hear it. They're chanting in support of the armed forces and the leader in the background. I don't know if you can hear it or not. Sorry for interrupting you.
oh, no, no worries. Oh, wow. I can't hear it, but I believe it. I've seen a number of the videos. And again, like Western media just they don't want to show that side of it. They're also not showing how badly Israel is being hit. And many of us in independent media have been covering that. Israel's pretending as though they're not getting damage, but a lot of damage has been done. This just came through as well. It's interesting, this account. Another Zionist account here says, this is Eli Afriat says, sirens here. Missiles have been launched from Iran. Pray for Israel. There were reports that there were sirens in northern Israel earlier Friday morning, but it's just wild here. Pray for Israel. It's really insane to me. Of course, like the comments are, very snarky. Like there is no such country as Israel. Why are you asking people to pray for civilians of Gaza? Are you, praying for those hiding from cluster bombs, phosphorus weapons, and double tap attacks in Lebanon? But the reality is
a lot of the strikes in Iran were double tap and continue to be double tap. A friend of mine witnessed this himself in Ferdowsi Square. A journalist who works for, I think, Dropsite News also told me that he went to another square where he interviewed people and it happened there. And people across people across the country are giving many examples where the U.S. and the Israeli regime jets strike or fire missiles, strike, and then wait a few minutes and then strike again, just like what they did with the school. They struck the school and then again they struck, I think 45 minutes again. Later, they struck the school again, and that's when most of the girls were slaughtered.
That's interesting. So it was more than one. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's wild to me that they're asking for prayers when they're the ones that initiated this, when they're the ones that are killing civilians in Beirut. To your point, like destroying an entire residential building. They attacked a journalist recently who I believe worked for RT, British journalist. I haven't heard any response from Keir Starmer about this. Luckily, that journalist is alive, but I saw the attack on Twitter. He could have easily been killed like that. But I mean, it's crazy to me. And I want to say this about the Iron Dome as well. As we warned people last year when there was that 12-day war between Israel and Iran, the Iron Dome doesn't stop everything, right? It's not as though you cannot penetrate the Iron Dome. You can get through it. And I think that this has been a wake-up call for people living in Israel, not because I've never seen Israel hit this hard before. And, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I've never seen them hit this hard before. And Western media is totally ignoring it or trying to pretend as though Israel is not getting damage. Israel is getting a lot of damages, including that Hafra oil refinery, which has also been hit. What do you think is going to happen here? Do you think that Netanyahu and Donald Trump are going to try to find a way to back out of this? I know they did say at one point, let's look at a ceasefire, but then they go back and forth between that. I don't think Iran would trust that the U.S. and Israel would actually obey a ceasefire at this point. I think they opened up Pandora's box.
Yes, Iran is not going to accept a ceasefire because all they'll do is regroup and rearm and attack again. That's what happened 8-9 months ago. The only thing that will bring an end to this is a change on the ground, where Iran feels assured that in future it cannot be attacked the way it has been attacked this time around. And that would mean real changes in the Persian Gulf. Iran will no longer allow these Arab family dictatorships, for example, to be able to create an environment where the United States can attack Iran from from this region. And Iran will definitely demand compensation, and Iran will demand that its allies across the region will be safe as well. I don't know what the United States will do. I think that the Israeli regime obviously would be more than happy to sacrifice the United States for the interests of the Israeli regime, no doubt. They don't care about the American people. The global economic crisis that is brewing is something that the Israelis don't care about at all. They don't care if people in India don't have gas. They don't care if the price of energy for factories across the world and for consumers go through the roof. But they are ethno-supremacists. They consider themselves to be a superior group of people, and the rest of the globe, they're Amalek. So basically the decision is Trump's. And Trump, one day he says it's almost over. The next day he says, we may take in troops. He's not normal. And so we in Iran are prepared for a very long war. The armed forces have prepared for a war that would last into next year. But then again, it may end earlier. But right now, the Iranians are prepared for a ground assault. And if that happens, I think we're going to see enormous escalation, and we're going to see much greater damage to oil and gas installations. Iran, from the very beginning, Sabrina, said that if our vital infrastructure is attacked, we will be hit back hard. And 2-3 days ago, the US and the Israelis carried out that attack on the Iranian gas field. I say the US and Israel because there's no way that the Israeli regime could have done it without coordination with the United States.
Right.
That was probably a test to see if they could hit and then if Iran would actually respond. And Iran hit back very hard. Next time, it will be much worse. I have no doubt. And I've been saying this for years. So I think these people, if they're listening to you, they should take it seriously. If the war ends without much further escalation and Iran's key demands and objectives are met, the Strait of Hormuz will be open, trade will flow. It will significant damage has already been done, and it won't go away for a very long time. But the oil and gas will flow. But if the war expands, all the assets in the Persian Gulf region will be destroyed. And that means there will be no more oil and gas and no tankers to take that non-existent oil and gas for years to come. And that will create a global economic depression worse than 1929. Yeah. So it's Trump's choice. But since Trump is he's a gambler and he's desperate, who knows what he's going to do next?
Where do you see Russia fitting in all of this? Apparently, Vladimir Putin had a phone call with Donald Trump over these oil attacks. And the Houthis, there was a message that went out today that the Houthis allegedly have warned the Gulf states to stop intercepting or trying to stop intercepting missiles. Do you think it's likely that the Houthis may get involved? And do you foresee Russia intervening in any way, shape, or form?
I think the Houthis or Ansarullah, the Yemeni armed forces, that they are going to get involved quite soon and in much bigger way than we've seen before. They've upgraded their capabilities. We remember that they defeated Trump in a 7-week war already. Trump, during those 7 weeks, constantly said he was winning, they were being destroyed. Hegseth was saying the same thing. And then after 7 weeks, he said, we won, they capitulated, and he walked away, and it was clear that he had failed completely. They had won. They're stronger today. And now Iran is fighting, and the resistance in Iraq, they too will escalate. And Iran, Sabrina, has not yet used its key capabilities. It's managing this war. It can escalate far further. The strikes on Qatar and Saudi and Emirati oil and gas installations that we saw in retaliation to what they did to Iran's gas installations were massive, but they were just at the tip of the iceberg. The American government has badly miscalculated Iran's capabilities, its badly miscalculated U.S. and Western and Israeli intelligence, the will of the Iranian people. And if the Americans expand, not only will Iran escalate, but its allies across the region will escalate. And Ansarullah, or the Yemen, or the Houthis, they are ready for war. And they have a huge force, just like the Iraqi resistance has a huge force. U.S. allies in the region don't even have the ability to fight. Qatar is a regime of, 350,000 people? It's a town. It's a small city in Iran. They have no capability of fighting, nor does the Bahraini regime, nor does the Emirati regime with 1 million or so citizens. Saudi Arabia, we already saw them carry out, with the full support of the collective West and regional countries from Turkey to Qatar, the war against Yemen. They continued it for 7 years. They failed, and they ultimately had to accept a ceasefire when Yemen started destroying their oil assets. So the U.S. allies in the region are weak, vulnerable, and unpopular. Across the region, people support Iran, despite Al Jazeera's propaganda, despite Al Arabia's propaganda, despite Erdogan's propaganda, despite Western media, because people know that the nature of the Israeli regime and what the truth is behind this war. And across the world, we're seeing sympathy and support for Iran, across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So this is not any further escalation is only going to make it worse for Trump, worse for the United States, worse for the world, but it will end in failure. And I think it will be the end of Trump's presidency.
Well said. Professor Marandi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Sabrina.